Well, he's dead.
Hello all, and welcome to episode 5 of this Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared theory series. In this episode, we are going to go over death. And not just what we've gone over already, we're going to look at everybody. Yellow guy, red guy, Duck, Roy, and even Lesley. But first, we have to start with a family. Back in episode 2 and 4, we talked about how Yellow guy, or really David, is Lesley's son. There are many clear moments to tell us this, so we know for a fact that David was once Lesley's son. You can check out the film theory video that goes a lot into David's death. Now, alright, we have 2 people in this family, but what if I told you that there was a third? We know that Yellow guy is David, but wait, we know something else. Let's take a look at the ending of episode 3.
Dad!
If Yellow guy is Roy's son, then that would mean that Roy is David's dad, right? Well, currently, this could just be seen as a funny bit as a fake father figure for this character, as we saw with Red Guy's family, so let's make sure that we are correct here. There's one more moment that I find quite important, and that's in episode 5. When we go through the David flashback, he looks next door at the other neighbors, and we can see something very interesting. This guy in the window next to Duck looks oddly similar to Roy. He has the same nose, similar eyes. The only thing that's different is that this is a human version of him. Let's write that down and approach this later. So now we know the full family, but this doesn't really answer anything about death. Well, let's start looking at our main cast of characters. Why don't we take a look at episode 2, titled Death, conveniently. We start the episode with the coffin, guessing Yellow guy is the person who died, a hint to David, but we get a lot more information throughout the entirety of this episode as well. At the very beginning, Duck said he died from dehydration. But isn't this just a joke for the plot of the episode? Well, we can see here that Duck had gotten his insides removed. Now, we know that they are dolls, but we do see them bleed, but Duck has gotten his insides removed. You can't really live with your insides removed. This is a bit interesting, so let's write it down. There's a few more things in this episode we should take a look at. When Yellow guy is sitting in his bedroom, sulking about Duck's death, we see a cameo with the lamp where he talks about the concept of life after death.
Something tells me that when we die, we go into the center of the earth. Well, it's not quite the center. It's in between the core and the surface. And we must relive our lives, but as a performance for a new super race known as the Council. And every time you get it right, you get a pound.
He says something weird here. I know everybody says something weird in the show, but this was especially weird because we've seen similar situations to this throughout the show. If we look back at the ending of episode 1, we can see this.
I almost forgot. You've earned this.
Duck gets a pound from the briefcase. Now, we can't just say that we solved everything through this. No, we can't say that we solved it. But what if something else could show this to us? Let's go back to episode 2 and look at Duck's funeral. We can see a slideshow of Duck's greatest moments. In it, we can see this. A picture of Duck in the workplace. We can start putting this all together now. To the blackboard! We know that Duck's insides were removed. We know that according to the lamp's idea of death, you get a pound every time you do something right. We know that Duck got a pound in the same episode as the workplace. And we see Duck actively in the workplace in the slideshow. We can put all of this together. It would seem that Lamp was onto something here. We have an actual moment where Duck gets a pound from doing something that he has done before, exactly like what Lamp said would happen after you die. And we see that Duck's insides got removed, so we have 2 confirmations from this one episode. Duck is dead, and the lamp was right. We have 2 confirmed deaths so far, but we also know how they died. David was hit by a car, and Duck died from dehydration. But there's still one more person that we haven't discussed of the main 3. Red Guy. Good old Mr. Peterson himself. Well, let's take a look. In episode 1, we see Red Guy get old, but he doesn't die. In episode 3, he gets his blood taken, but again, doesn't die. But episode 2, we do hear something quite interesting when Red Guy wants to be dead. He opens up the family wallet, something that we all have, of course, and we hear this.
I was more hoping that I was dead.
What? Don't be silly. You don't die for ages.
Aw.
You die in the lake.
Huh?
I think you drown. It's definitely
Great, yeah,
water.
whatever. Back in your cupboard.
The wallet says that Red Guy drowns in a lake. Now, there is a problem that arises here. The ID card says that Red Guy doesn't die for a while, and only Dux has the X's over the eyes to indicate his death, but this is also already wrong. We know for a fact that Yellow Guy / David is dead, so his ID card should also have the X's over the eyes. The looks of these ID cards are just props for this episode, so we can't really trust the looks of them. So is Red Guy really dead? Well, let's look at one thing that can tie all of this together in a nice bow. In episode 3, Yellow Guy defines family in a funny way.
And die on the same day in the same style of accident but in different locations.
Well said, brother.
He says that a family dies on the same day in the same style of accident. And then, Red Guy specifically calls Yellow Guy his brother as if to confirm this statement. This is the full proof we need to know that Red Guy is dead too. But wait, if we're going by this statement, and we know how Red Guy and Duck died, how could they possibly have died in the same style of accident? Well, let's take a look at Duck's slideshow in episode 2 again. We can see that Duck's final moment is in a plane, which is a form of transportation, which is the same thing that causes Yellow Guy's death. But once again, didn't Duck die from dehydration? Well, yes. A very common way to die from dehydration is being stranded. It is very easy to be stranded in a plane crash. Just look at the plot of Castaway. A plane crash caused Tom Hanks to be stranded. A form of transportation causes Duck's death. But once again, how does this relate back to Red Guy? Let's look at the ending of Transportation. Why Transportation? Well, every time we see a character's death, it is in an episode that is heavily centered towards them. We see Duck's death in episode 2, which is all about Duck, and we see Yellow Guy's death in episode 5, but his full death in episode 6, where he's the main character of that episode. Now, episode 5 is heavily centered towards Red Guy, as he is the one who breaks out and drives them the entire time. At the end of this episode, there are some very key things that happen here. Red Guy's car breaks down at a dump, leaving him stranded as well. While we can't see exactly where this location is, we can definitely see a lot more than we think we can. But this time, it isn't something like brightening an image. We have to go to Instagram. A few weeks ago, Becky uploaded a photo to promote the hunt for the Lesley car. The creators of the show hid the Lesley car in a random dump, presumably in the UK, which sucks because that means I can't look for it. But the main point of this is the next image here. We can see the Lesley car again, but from a different angle. And hold on, what's that behind it? Water! Red Guy, in his transportation breakdown, ended up stranded near water, which, just like Duck's death, parallels perfectly with both what the ID car said and what Yellow Guy said. We now know that Yellow Guy was killed by a car, Duck died from dehydration after a plane crash, and Red Guy drowned after an accident with his car. That's amazing. We're starting to get somewhere. So let's continue. We know that all these dolls are dead people, but what does that mean for Roy? I mean, he is a puppet as well, no? Well, let's go back to episode 5. We can see the human Roy in the window of his house in the same flashback where we can see David's death. As we know, these characters were people before they died, which is solidified through the actual people that we see throughout this show. We can also say that if he's looking at David through the window only seconds before he's run over, then he in fact witnessed David's death just like Lesley. And while Lesley was distraught over David's death, I don't think we can say the same for Roy. As we see Roy interact with Yellow Guy throughout the original YouTube show, Roy seems very absent and neglectful of Yellow Guy and his needs. And we can also see this in episode 3 when Roy pushes Yellow Guy aside because he cares more about this family than Yellow Guy. Now, to figure out what happened to Roy, it would require some speculation without full evidence, but by analyzing human behavior. We have someone who is very distraught over the death of their child and someone who doesn't seem to care. Obviously, there would be a lot of disagreements in this situation, and it could very easily lead to fights and an eventual split. This idea of Roy being kicked out of Lesley's life is solidified by episode 5 when we see a very broken looking Roy in the car with them that Yellow Guy had mentioned been found on the side of the road.
Such comfortable seats, I might have a
And
sleep.
I found this guy in the road.
What?
Roy seems to not have died at the same time as the rest of these characters, considering he is not considered to be in the family with our main 3 characters, only being associated with Yellow Guy, but we know he did die considering his current status as a puppet when seeing him as a human earlier. Now, there's one more thing we need to discuss. Lesley. She seems to be human, but is held together by these stitches. We know how distraught she was from David's death, as we can hear her scream in the flashback, and we know what being a puppet means. In a very sad conclusion, I think we might be able to figure out what happened to Lesley as she climbed her way out of this state while being forever scarred from it. Well, we figured out what happened to everyone with their deaths, but why don't we try to figure out some of their life? We can really only comfortably discuss David and Duck's former life, though. David was seemingly an only child and moved to a new town, Melhoven, at a young age with his mother, Lesley, father, Roy, and his dog. Very shortly after they arrived, the local town priest decided to greet David and make him feel welcome in this town while his dad was meeting the other neighbors and his mother was off doing something. Sadly, when his gift began to fly into the road, David decided to chase it until he was met with his mother's car. That is the unfortunate death of David/Yellow Guy. In Duck's former life, however, he used to train in martial arts, played the banjo, graduated from school, and got a job in the workplace. He eventually got promoted to an executive decision, had the money to eat extravagantly, but then his passion for the military began taking him over until he finally joined the Air Force. Eventually, there was a problem with his plane, and he became stranded and died from dehydration as a member of the Air Force. Red Guy, we can only safely know that he had car troubles until he ended up at a dump, and then tragically drowned in the lake behind it. Now, I feel like we should go back to the lamp's discussion, as he says a lot of things that we are starting to show in our explanations here. The lamp mentions receiving a pound after successfully reenacting a moment in your life, which Duck gets after the Jobs episode, as we see in his memories. There is even a pound on the book to show its importance. Now, if the lamp was right, we need to really start discussing the rest of what he says, such as, who is the council? Who could this council be? Well, the highest power in the show. The ones who control every character more or less, and indirectly gave Duck a pound for the proper reenactment. We started discussing this in episode 4 when we built this feudal pyramid. Even though Lesley and Roy are very high powers in the show, they are not the highest powers. Lesley and Roy seem to be the caretakers/supervisors of this show. One, a puppet involved with the characters directly, and one, a humanish character influencing these characters indirectly and keeping an eye on the upper floors of this house. The actors, however, are an unstoppable force, literally controlling anything they want to. They are the council. Lesley doesn't just want to escape from random characters, she wants to escape the council. I'm getting a little excited now, but we still have one part of Lamp's explanation to look over. The lamp says that when they die, they go into not quite the center of the earth, but they are clearly not in the center of the earth. But Lamp does say that it isn't quite the center of the earth. All of these characters are located on the bottom floor of this dollhouse, the farthest away from the top, which is the center of this isolated world. Everyone is dead. The main 3 characters died at the exact same times in different locations, all due to transportation accidents and malfunctions. And in death, they are forced to perform their own lives for the council, getting a pound if they do it correctly, but these characters don't want to be here, so they consistently try to escape, not letting them get the award they were promised. But Jeebus, this show is complicated. Now, like I said before, this next video coming up is very special, and I'm not sure exactly when it'll come out, so make sure you have notifications turned on after subscribing to know exactly when that video is up, because if you've liked everything so far, you will want to know when that video is out. If you enjoyed the video or have any evidence to solidify my theory or even some disproof, comment it down below, and depending on the time of day, I'll check it out and most likely respond. Once again, before I go, so sorry to do this to any of you who don't really care about this part of the video, but thank you all so much. We hit over 15,000 subscribers, another crazy milestone to me. This is all moving insanely quickly, and I just can't thank you all enough. And I'm going to start planning some special things for future milestones to thank all of you who support this channel by watching my content and subscribing. So once again, thank you all so much, and I'll catch you in the next one.